The one thing that most modern game developers forget about is the power of illusion. Video games are an illusion. That's all they ever were. When you're trying to create something that is compelling and interesting, there are numerous ways to do it. However, the best way to do it is to do as much as you can with as little as possible. What I mean by this is that instead of trying to create these huge, massive games that try to feel as real as possible, you cut out all of the bullshit that doesn't need to be there, and you focus in on those small things that are very important, the small things that really matter, and you put 100% of your effort into that. You make an illusion that makes people think that they are roaming a huge world without even knowing about it. Why don't game developers strive for that anymore? Well, that's simple. Technology. There's no need to create these methods of providing an illusion to the player, when you can just simply present to the player everything. But the problem with presenting everything to the player is that the player loses their sense of curiosity. They've seen everything. What more is there to see? There's nothing else to see. They've seen it all, and they're left feeling empty. Game developers are depriving us of our creative energies by making sure that people see it all. What exactly is creativity at the end of the day? Because this is something that a lot of people don't seem to understand. I actually think that the real reason why creativity is lacking in gaming today is because people do not understand how to truly define the term creativity. And it's the lack of creativity that is denying us of this illusion. Now, to truly understand why we don't see illusions as often in games anymore, we need to figure out what creativity actually means. And the answer is simple. Creativity is the ability to reach the boundaries of one's limits. Or I could say a completely different way. Creativity is the ability to go beyond one's limits. And that is powerful, because everything has a perceived limitation. Especially if you're a game developer, you'll notice that there are limits that you cannot achieve. Well, at least back in the day there was. But nowadays, it's completely limitless. The things that engines can do are tremendous. You can do so much with a game engine nowadays. The problem is that the techniques that were used to create the illusions have been forgotten about. And because of that, we lack that sense of curiosity that keeps the game interesting, that keeps us wanting to see the sequel, that keeps us wanting to see what happens next. And I think that this is the biggest problem with video games today. On top of everything else, with DLC, microtransactions, and all of the bullshit that publishers have brought upon us, I think the biggest reason why games today are not as good as they were before is simply the fact that there's no curiosity anymore. Part of that is due to the internet. The internet has killed that, because the internet has everything all in one place. You can find anything out just by going to the internet and finding out what happens and finding out the truth, and the information's all there. So why have an illusion when there's information already there? And I do think that game developers are thinking this. If you're not going to willingly give in to the illusion, then it's not going to work on you. It's like professional wrestling. It's all an illusionary art form, just like video games. The difference is that it's an illusion that is performed in real life, whereas video games are an illusion that is presented to you on a screen. That's the only difference. That, and with a video game, you get to interact and play it. And it is so important that game developers remember this. It is the one thing that can make a good game into a phenomenal game. And that is why I put games like Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria and Painkiller of my top 5 games of all time. Because both of those games have something in common. The developers put so much effort into creating an incredible ambience, both visually and musically. But what they didn't do is make a huge world. They didn't make a huge, empty, barren wasteland. They made very tight, small environments. Okay, in Painkiller's case, they are not so tight because of gameplay reasons, but this is not an open world. These are linear levels. And if you notice, my number 1 favourite game of all time is Valkyrie Profile 2. Why is that? Because Valkyrie Profile 2 is extremely compressed from a visual standpoint. And the reason for that is that it's a side-scrolling game. So instead of having this huge plane which you can roam around, they cut all of that pointless roaming possibility, and instead they just have a corridor which goes from left to right. And if you want to enter buildings or go into the landscape, you press forward and a walking animation into where you're going will play, and then you're in another side-scrolling screen. And it's actually quite genius, because they cut away all of the needless things and focused in on the important things. The important thing is that you see the landscape, that you can talk to people, that you can get a good sense of what this place is like, that you can actually go and shop for things, that you can actually take in all of the atmosphere. Everything is there that needs to be there. But there's no padding, there's no filler, there's no needless roaming. It's tight, and that's why it works. So, how does that apply to modern game design? Well, it's simple. Modern games have these huge open worlds. And even indie games don't always get it. They don't always understand. I'm not speaking for every indie game, but there are indie games that don't always get it. And they still think that it's all about cramming as much as possible into a game. Just look at the sizes of the installs for games nowadays, and how there's tons of gigabytes that you have to install on your hard drive today. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be that you would get a disc that had a limited space. But now that games are all digital, the limitation of space is no longer an issue because of modern technology. So why try to work around limits? There's no incentive there. And without that incentive, we don't get that magic anymore. And that is the biggest problem with games today. Thanks for watching.